Hey everybody, welcome back to Culz Book Reviews. We got an exciting episode for you this week as we check out Once Upon a Time in Fort Sumner by John LeMay. Now this one is actually book 2 in the Billy the Kid trilogy, Dumas trilogy, or 21 Guns series. And if you haven't yet, check out a review, Noted Desperado Pancho Dumas, which is actually book 1. Now you'll see something here. This one takes place in 1976, and book 2 actually takes place in 1950. So we're actually traveling back in time. Now, if you've checked out our interview with John, this is something you should expect because he actually said the trilogy's working backwards. And so the third one will probably take place, I'm guessing, around the time where Billy finds the Lost Adams stuff. So let's take a look at the outside of the book real quick. So up top, again, we got John LeMay, the author. And then we got Once Upon a Time in Fort Sumner. And I've always enjoyed how the titles actually form a shape. The first one, as you see here on the cover, was in the shape of Billy the Kid's footstone. This one features a much more cool blue color template. You can see a lot of the main characters as well as the skinwalker here. Again, we have 1950. And right here, LP is for the artist Logan Pack. Now, we were able to meet both John and Logan in Roswell, which was super neat. And I was able to pick up a couple books from his table, including The Noted Desperado, and I'm sure glad I did, because I'm really enjoying this series. And honestly, I think I enjoyed this one much more. Something cool with the A's, you see that wolf, kind of referencing the skinwalker here. I don't know if it's just me, but kind of reminds me of Dane DeHaan from The Kid. On the side, we got Once Upon a Time in Fort Sumner, Bicep Books. And again, this is number 2 of the 21 Guns series. And then this one just kind of tells you a little bit about what's going to happen within this book, which is kind of weird because some of it, obviously we know because this is, again, the past of what we read in the Noted Desperado. But I think even then, there's still a lot that's really can surprise you, I'll say. But again, I'm trying to do this without spoilers, which is really hard. I'm trying to bite my tongue. Right here, we got the ISBN if you need that. This one clocks in at 260 pages, which makes it a little bit longer than the original book that clocked in at 249. So throughout, much like the last one, it's mainly text, but there are some really neat pictures throughout. As you saw one pass, I'm trying to get to one that's like maybe not so much of a spoiler, perhaps. Here's one that happens pretty early on in the book. We see page 80. But again, just some really neat artwork that just helps you kind of visualize the scene a little bit more if you couldn't already, which I think you really can. I will say writing in this one, you can definitely see the growth for John as a writer in this book. Just the difference between The Noted Desperado and Once Upon a Time in Fort Sumner. Because obviously, Noted Desperado was his very first book he wrote, even though it wasn't the first one he published. I think this one just has a more steady storyline, if that makes sense. It builds a little bit slower, and there's just a little bit more time to breathe. The other one was super fast-paced, and so this one, I think, just has the perfect amounts of just character building with action. There is quite a bit of action scenes. Obviously, it talks about skinwalkers, like I said at the cover, and you get some pretty fantastic scenes with different skinwalkers, and just some creepy pictures or just creepy depictions, how they're transforming, and just their eyes. Like, you can really visualize their eyes based on the descriptions that John gives. So this story does take place in 1950 and follows Pancho and Hondo Dumas, who were the brothers that were mentioned. Obviously, being that Hondo was the father of, Pancho and Dorado from our previous book. Even though we kind of know where their story ends up further down the road, we really don't know how it plays out throughout this book. And what's really cool is throughout the book, characters or places come up from the previous book, and it just triggers that memory, at least for me. Somebody would show up, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember them from the first one, and it's kind of interesting to see how they interact here, and then knowing how things turn out in the next book. I'm trying not to ruin it, guys. I'm sorry. It's really good, and it just came out, so I want to give everyone the proper amount of time to go read it. So outside of Skinwalkers and the Dumas brothers, again, there's that character Tumbleweed Williams, who is like John's creation, it is based upon mainly the Brushy Bill story with a little bit of Walk Along Smith. But I will say, if you know the Brushy story and how the court procedure went out, and Brushy's end, will say, you will at least see the similarities there. Tumbleweed Williams is this character that comes out, says he's Billy the Kid, and nobody believes him. He gets a lot wrong when he's, talking to the governor and forgets stuff, or just makes it seem kind of odd how he's answering. And there's definitely a reason for that. And this one answers the question upon where Billy is actually buried, at least in the book universe. Because obviously from the last book we know he wasn't underneath the headstone in Fort Sumner. But this one, like I said, does give us closure, at least where Billy is buried. I'm sorry, this review probably seems kind of all over the place because, man, I really did enjoy this one. Like I said, I think I enjoyed it more than the last one, which I gave a really good rating for. But I would rate this one higher. I would say probably at least an 8.5 out of 10, if not maybe an 8.6, 8.7. It was really entertaining, and I really can't wait to pick up the next one. I do expect it to deal with the Billy storyline, finding the Adams treasure, as well as another character that we meet in this story. And I don't want to ruin who that is, but once you read this book, you'll understand. And maybe we can just learn a little bit more about the whole Pat Garrett situation. But yeah, I think this one's a great adventure story, and it really delves into a different world compared to the Noted Desperado, which was more of just like an action one. This one's action mixed with that kind of horror, supernatural theme. The Skinwalker aspect, like I said, is fantastic, creepy, and there is quite a bit more death in this one, I will say. And it's kind of interesting too. Kind of like Star Wars, there are certain aspects how it seems like time's repeating itself. Kind of like what George Lucas says, right? It's poetry, it rhymes and stuff like that. But there is certain situations in here where it does seem similar to the last book, and characters do mention that. They're like, hey, it seems like time's repeating itself. Again, guys, I really, really enjoyed this book. It was fun. It was entertaining. John LeMay does not disappoint. Perhaps at some point we'll go more in depth. Once the whole series is done, we'll do a whole kind of timeline of this trilogy, and I really can't wait to see where the other 21 Guns series goes, because I know obviously this one is about Billy the Kid and the Dumas brothers. I really can't wait to see the other trilogies within this series. So yeah, I think without ruining too much, I will just end it there. It's a great book, like I said. I really enjoyed it. Personally, I think it's my favorite so far of the two, and I say it's worth a read. Go find it. It's on Amazon. I'll link in the description below. And we'll have to get some more John LeMay books read here shortly. But if you guys want more Culz book reviews, click that link to your left. If you want to see more about what we're doing here at Culz Paranormal, click that link to your right. And don't forget to hit that like and give us a subscribe. And let us know, have you read either The Noted Desperado or Once Upon a Time in Fort Sumner? Or do you have a favorite John LeMay book?